Hello, this is Harriet Bihar, the Senior Organic Specialist with the Midwest Organic and Sustainable Education Service, located in Spring Valley, Wisconsin. We are also known as Moses. You are listening to a webinar entitled Learning the Lingo, Understanding the Language Used in Financial Conversations and when working with a whole variety of USDA agencies, as well as agricultural lenders and bankers in your region. We want to thank the Farm Service Agency for their funding, which supported the production of this series of webinars to help you access and understand Farm Service Agency programs as well as the wider landscape of financial options for you as an agricultural producer. As you know, language can be a funny thing. One thing, when you think of something, its meaning, it may mean something completely different to someone else. And some words that are in plain English that you might understand to have one meaning really have somewhat of a different meaning when you are using them in the financial landscape. So I will help you understand through this webinar when a lender says something to you, you will understand exactly what they mean, what they're expecting of you, and then you can move forward. It really does help to understand what they are looking for so you can build your business plan or your documents to meet their needs and not have a bunch of false starts, which then just takes even more time. I'll also go through some of the acronyms and shortened phrases to help you in navigating your options within agricultural financing and help you understand the various governmental and non-governmental agencies that can be of help with technical assistance and dollars to improve your farm operation. So the first is I'm going to go through a variety of different USDA agencies. The first one is the Agricultural Marketing Service, AMS. And under this agency, there are a variety of different programs which can be useful to you as a farmer. First is the National Organic Program. That is a sub-agency of the AMS, where if you wanted organic certification, you would go to them and find a variety of organic certification agents. You can find all the standards there, all the materials that you can use in organic, and even a list of organic operations if you want to try to find a market to sell something to later on. So if you grow organic livestock feed, you can, in Oklahoma, you can find organic operations in Oklahoma that might want to buy organic livestock feed. Other areas of AMS is they do grading, like for vegetables and things like that, grade A. They also offer a variety of grants. They offer specialty crop block grants, farmers market promotion grants, local food promotion program. They do offer organic certification cost share along with the Farm Service Agency to help pay for the costs of organic certification, and they help with people who are producing and marketing sheep. Another thing that they do is they have the Agricultural Research Service under their wing, where they put out a wide variety of very useful agricultural bulletins on every type of agricultural production you can think of. And lastly, they do, well, not lastly, they do other things too, but the Economic Research Service helps you understand the costs and profitability of various agricultural ventures, including organic. So as you are developing your business plan, you can go to these reports, and that will help you give you a ballpark of what you might consider to be the possible profitability of your operation and what it might cost you. So if you are looking to get an operating loan, this would be very useful. Another agency under the USDA is the Farm Service Agency, otherwise known as the FSA. This is a very important agency because they kind of oversee with the Nrcs, which is coming up next, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They kind of track all the different farms in the United States and operations that have rural land that they are doing agricultural production on. And you need a farm number, which then helps them track you, see exactly where you're located. Are you near wetlands? What kind of history your farm had as far as cropping, and all of that is tracked through the Farm Service Agency. And that farm number is very important to have because it kind of sets you up in their system. It's not like they're going to be tracking you like Big Brother, but it helps them know which pieces of land may have been in some kind of set-aside program or have some kind of easements, and that's how they're tracking all of that. An important program that they also do is the Conservation Reserve Program called CRP, and that is where they pay farmers to not grow crops on certain land. Typically, it's highly erodible or other sensitive agricultural lands that could be easily eroded or have issues with water contamination. It's also known by many farmers as the set-aside program. And there are many millions of acres in CRP. Typically, it's a contract for 10 to 15 years for the operator to take it out of production. They are allowed at times during drought or whatever to maybe cut some hay off of that land, but basically it is left for wildlife. When a producer wants to take their land out of CRP or their contract is up, there is a program under the Farm Service Agency called the Transitions Incentive Program, which then pays that landowner a few more years of their previous CRP payment, but only if they then rent that land to a beginning farmer or rancher who is managing that land in a sustainable way. Because as I said, that land is typically highly erodible. So if someone was taking land out of CRP and a beginning farmer wanted to rent that land for rotational grazing of their beef operation, the owner of the land would still be getting payments from the government for that, and then they would hopefully charge the beginning farmer less money since they would already be getting payments from the government for that land. So that was really a way to bring in beginning farmers to farming at a lower cost for a few years because the landowner would be getting other payments. The other thing that they do is they have some financial assistance programs. If you are an organic producer, you have to have land between you and the conventional neighbor where you cannot harvest an organic crop within a certain distance. Usually it's 25 to 30 feet. It could be more, to prevent drift or chemical drift from going onto your organic crop. The Farm Service Agency has a program called a Conservation Buffer Zone for organic, where they will pay the landowner for that conservation area, that 30-foot strip along the buffer zone between you and the conventional farmer. So you would not be losing the value. Of course, you couldn't cut it for hay or whatever. It has to remain wild, but you can put in trees or pollinator habitat in that area. So that's kind of a nice little benefit from the Farm Service Agency. They'll also do natural disaster financial assistance. This is, again, another important reason to have a farm number with them. So if there is a disaster in your region, you would have access to programs that could help you there. And as you know, there seems to be more and more of those natural disasters going on. They also provide organic certification cost share, similar to the AMS, helping you pay for the cost of certification, 75% of the cost up to $750. They also offer a crop insurance product called NAP. This is the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Agricultural Production Program. And this program insures non-commodity crops, so not corn, not soybeans, not cotton, not wheat, but it's really for kind of specialty crop growers. But there are other products also available for crop insurance for vegetable producers. But this is one offered from the Farm Service Agency. And numerous of our other webinars are going to cover many of the loans that the Farm Service Agency offers, like their farm storage facility loans, their low interest microloans and conservation loans, purchase or enlarging real estate or buildings, and operating loans. And there will be other webinars that dig into that a lot deeper than I am. I'm just listing them out here. Then we have the Nrcs, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. And they are an agency that focuses on conservation and helps farmers who are the largest group of people who own land around the country, that especially sensitive land because it's being tilled and growing crops, where we could have issues with degradation of soil or water quality. And in this picture here, you can see that there are a variety of things that they'll help you with. So you can see that it's much more beneficial to have a filter strip along a waterway to prevent erosion from the field from going into the creek and silting it up and harming the fish. Windbreaks to prevent wind erosion, as well as drift, grass waterways to collect water that runs downhill and then off into the waterway. It kind of cleanses it. Wetland restoration, and lots of other things that they do. They also have programs that are very beneficial for direct production activities. Things like helping you set up a rotational grazing plan for your farm if you have animals of any sort, ruminants, beef cattle, sheep, even rotational grazing for swine, whatever you may need. And they will help pay for some of that fencing cost, for watering facilities, for animal walkways. So they kind of offer the whole package. So first you get the technical assistance to make sure you're really doing it right and paying attention to the environment that you're working within, and then they help you with some cost share dollars. They don't pay for everything, but they will give you a significant portion to put in specific activities like interior fencing that you will be moving for your rotational grazing. They help you if you have never planted cover crops before. They have dollars to help you put in a cover crop rotation on your farm for early, mid, and late season cover cropping, cover crop cocktails where you use a variety of different types of seeds and crops to gain various benefits from those cover crops. And of course, anything that prevents erosion, like we see here with the filter strips and the grass waterways, the terracing, whatever. The Nrcs personnel are very highly skilled, can come out to your farm, do a farm walkover, and make recommendations for immediate and future activities to improve your operation. And of course, keeping the soil on your land is only going to help you grow better crops more abundantly and of higher quality. And of course, they also help too with wildlife and pollinator habitat improvements. So if you're interested in helping the monarch butterflies or honeybees, they have programs to pay for native plantings, putting in shrubs and trees for wildlife. So there's a lot of things that you can do, and especially if you live there on your farm, it's nice to have a diverse ecosystem there for you to enjoy. And if you like to hunt, making habitat for pheasants or whatever is only a benefit to you as well as to them. Another program that the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS, has is the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. So it's similar to EQIP, But it's kind of like the second tier. Once you have some conservation activities in place, you can then move into this program, which has more unique practices and interesting activities for you to choose from. Um, and uh, it's a 5-year program instead of anywhere from 1 to 3 years for EQUIP, where you do activities on your farm that further enhance the ecosystem and improve the conservation. So NRCS deals with conservation concerns and tries to mitigate them on the agricultural landscape. Another agency under the USDA is the Risk Management Agency, the RMA, and they offer crop insurance. That is their main goal. And of course, we just never know when we're going to get a heavy rain or some kind of weather or other activity that might ruin our crop for the year. And especially if you have a loan that you're trying to pay back, many lenders require you to have crop insurance to make sure that some money will be coming in at the end of the year so you can pay your debt. They offer crop insurance for commodity crops, and they work through private agricultural crop insurance agencies for that, but it's underwritten by the USDA RMA. They also offer an interesting insurance product called the Whole Farm Revenue Protection Crop Insurance. And this is really a very optimal product of crop insurance for diverse operations. So if you grow corn and beans and hay and sell all those things and also have beef cattle and maybe some poultry as well, you might want to look at whole farm revenue protection, because the payments that you make on that crop insurance are actually lessened the more diverse you are. And it kind of, if you're trying to insure lots of different enterprises, this is kind of a one-stop deal here. So I would encourage you to look at that for crop insurance, especially if you have found that other crop insurance really doesn't work for you. They help beginning farmers and ranchers with a variety of different products for crop insurance. They have special pricing for organic crops, and they also help livestock producers individually with insurance when the gross margin, for some reason, has been lost, probably because either the feed costs spiked very quickly or the market value dropped very quickly. And that affected your bottom line there at the end of the season. So those are the basic USDA agencies that really deal with financial activities across the board. There are other programs specific to whatever commodity that you are producing. And I would encourage you to go into a USDA office and ask them about all the different programs that they offer. So now I'm going to start into the financial glossary. And these are definitions to aid borrowers in understanding what those lenders are talking about. The other thing, too, is once you understand what they need, it will help you organize what documents you need, prioritizing what you need to get done first, and pulling together your financial information so you can answer the questions when they ask them instead of having to have numerous meetings with them because you didn't realize what they needed to know. And of course, we're going to go over what they are talking about when they say certain things to you. So the first thing is that there really is a difference between a bank and a lender. A bank is a private entity that provides a whole variety of financial services. That's where you have your checking account, you can get loans there. They do a whole variety of different financial services, have money market funds, your savings account. You can do health savings accounts there, or whatever you may need to do. Those are banks. But a lender is really not looking for anyone to set up a savings account. And they are specifically set up for lending out funds for others to borrow. And if you live in an agricultural area, you will find that there are lenders that specialize in agricultural lending. I mean, you can try also going to your local bank, but really you should probably look at an agricultural lender who will understand more what you're doing and be probably more willing to lend to you. Another thing, too, is your credit score and credit history. If you've had a credit card or gotten a car loan or had a student loan, you have a credit history. And you should know what that is. You should know about that even before you go in and ask anyone for a loan. And you can get your credit history or credit score at these 3 different companies, Experian, TransUnion, or Equifax. And legally, under the Fair Credit Reporting Act, you are entitled to get at least 1 free credit report per year from each of these major credit bureaus. So that would be an important thing to just check, and it's not a bad idea to even check it every few years just to make sure that they haven't made a mistake on you. This will affect what type of interest someone would be willing to give to you, and you want to try to get the best interest rate that you can on whatever loan they are going to give you. Now, interest is basically their fee for lending you that money. So if you have a $50,000 loan with monthly payments over 5 years, you can see the difference here between a 3, 4, and 5% interest. And that really is very significant. Like if you look between the 3% interest and the 5% interest, the amount of interest that you pay over the 5 years on that $50,000 is $1,700, which is significant. So you want to try to have the best credit reading or credit score that you can and be aware of that. And if there is some reason that your credit score is lower than a lender may like, you might maybe be able to explain why that happened, if it's a student loan or whatever. But it'd be a good idea to know so you can try to get the best interest rate. So, what are assets? Well, assets, you might think, are, and you're right, are tangible, fixed property, land, buildings, vehicles, those sorts of things. They can also be current assets, could be inventory of production that can be sold. So this young woman here has a young piglet, that could be either she could sell it as a feeder pig or she can sell it as a slaughter animal. But that would be considered an asset. But another asset is intangible, and that could be either training or experience. So when you go into a bank and you want to borrow money to purchase a dairy herd, an asset would be that you grew up on a dairy farm, or that you worked for a dairy producer for 3 years, or that you have a degree in dairy science from a university. So an asset is not only something physical, it is also what you bring to the operation in your brain. What is your experience? What are your skills? And make sure that you have that in the documentation that you are presenting to your lender. And of course, any property that you might have, any livestock that you might have, equipment, investments, those are all lists of assets. But I really do stress, whatever training or experience or skills you have is also an asset. And make sure that you don't sell yourself short, and tell the lender what you do have in that area. A liability. A liability is the debt that you are owed by a person or a business. So you may, so the bank will see you, or the lender, if you have taken a loan from them, you now have a liability with them. It's also any future obligations that are based on a past transaction. So this could be any kind of loan, mortgage, or land contract, any livestock that you own that you still owe money on, and of course, your credit card debt. Those are liabilities. Default. So default is not like on a computer where you go back to the original setting. Default in finances means that you failed to meet your liability. You failed to meet your debt, to meet the requirements of the financial agreement that you had with your lender. So you don't want to see the red pen, but there may be times, there could be health issues, there could be weather or markets that cause you to not meet the requirements of your loan. You're not making your monthly payments, you know, whatever it might be. So you need to give thought to this, because this is really not going to make your credit score look very good if you have numerous defaults on your record. Being in a good relationship with your lender does help when things go wrong. If you let them know right away, you can maybe stay out of default. But if you get letters in the mail that say payment overdue and you don't open them, that is not a smart business practice. So, this gets a little confusing. And debt can be very useful. Debt is when you owe something to someone else. And this can help you, especially in agriculture, where the startup costs can be quite high, to get a foot in the door to do the type of operation that you want to do. So a debt service is the amount of cash that's required to pay both the principal, like that $50,000 for that loan, and the interest, which could be of any rate, on all your loans over a period of time. So you may have in your debt service a loan for the land. You may have an operating loan to get seed and fertility inputs or breeder stock for your livestock operation. And you may also have a loan on your tractor or your combine. So you know, many times agricultural producers have numerous loans for a variety of reasons. The debt service is all of those together. So you can see on a monthly basis what you need to be producing in cash to pay that debt service. And that's what debt service coverage is. That after all your annual operating expenses to keep you moving day to day, you have enough cash from profit or from sale of your assets, like your livestock or your crops, to meet those debts. So then the lender will also look at something called the debt service ratio. And they will look at your net operating income divided by your debt service. So they basically want to make sure that if they're going to give you a loan, that you are generating enough income to service that debt. So you have to think too, if you're in a volatile market where the price could drop precipitously, well, when your profit margins shrink, then the coverage of that debt is also going to suffer. So you always need to maybe give yourself a little bit more cushion there when you're thinking about borrowing, especially if you're in a volatile market. If you have the chance to sell an asset to pay the debt, it doesn't hurt to have something like that kind of in your back pocket. But always think about, how can I repay that loan and not have something on the edge? And of course, your lender will be working with you on that. So a balance sheet. You've probably heard about this. So this is your assets. Remember, and of course, we won't put in there your education and your skills, but these are your fixed assets, your intermediate, and your current. So you can see what they have there, your farmland, buildings and improvements. Then intermediate, these are things that have a shorter lifespan, that will be sold or lose their capabilities after a certain amount of time. And then, of course, the current are more liquid assets that can be, um, used for paying the debt. And of course, this is a pretty big operation here, but that's what I was able to find on the internet. Looks like an organic producer here. And then, of course, the liabilities. So there's the asset, but then you can see the liability against that asset, how much is still owed on that farm real estate and on the building depreciation, the machinery, and of course, even with that cash on hand, there's still quite a bit of loan payment that needs to be made on those debts. So this helps you give you a picture of where you stand. And of course, the lender would like to see this as well before they give you a further loan. If you're just starting out, or even if you're already in business and you don't have a business plan, it can be very useful, and it is very useful to put together a plan of where you've been, where you are now, and where you plan to go in the future. And you can have business plans for various enterprises on your farm. The other thing, too, is it helps you understand your competition, any kind of threats that might happen to your operation that you need to be thinking about, and of course, different strategies to achieve the goals that you want to have and to deal with those threats or competition. And then the word benchmark means a way to track your progress in your business plan. And many times this is developed through budgeting. So you might set up a budget, a quarterly budget that you want to meet on your farm to help you move towards your goal of having a certain amount of dollars in the bank to service your debt. So there's two kinds of expenses. There's capital expenses and there's operating expenses. The capital expenses are for purchasing or upgrading physical assets like land or equipment or other machinery. And this will typically provide a long-term benefit without annual expense. If you build a new machine shed, hopefully you won't have to do any repairs on that for many, many years. But there is a pretty big upfront cost for putting that building up, and then it just offers you the benefits of having a place to fix your equipment or keep it out of the weather and do maintenance, whatever. And on a vegetable farm, you could build a packing shed. And again, that just offers you long-term benefit without annual expense. Then operating expenses, which you can get loans for both capital and operating. For operating expenses, this is where the cost of routine repairs, you have to replace tires, you have to get new new oil and diesel for running the tractors, seeds, fertility inputs, livestock, all of these things are considered operating expenses, purchases that would be done on an annual basis. And other administrative expenses not directly tied to production, like having someone do your taxes. So, we've been talking about debt and expense. Let's talk about the fun part, income. So, if you have off-farm income, that can be put on your balance sheet because that will show that you have that cash asset coming in. And if you have a spouse that perhaps works off the farm, doesn't really, or works with you on the farm, but also has a part-time job, those things can also be put on that balance sheet and should be brought into consideration and told to the loan officer. Any freelancing income you might have, if you go out and make custom square bales for someone, or help manage someone's heifers or feed someone's calves, all of those things that are off farm but are still farm income, that would be another thing to put there in that income. And of course, if you are receiving child support, you're legally required to list that. So it's good to look at your tax returns for at least the past 2 years and have that available for the farm lender so they can see where your income is coming from. If you have been purchasing items, have the invoices and the receipts. And if you think that, let's say you're in transition to organic, or you're just you're just doubling your acreage, or you're going to have a new enterprise, like moving into beef cattle or something like that, you should have some kind of justification to the lender why you're planning to have higher income for yourself, but also like in organic, the prices are a little higher and your lender may not be aware of that. So having some information like from the Agricultural Marketing Service, which has reports through the Economic Research Service, that's why I told you about those people earlier in the webinar. They have historical information on organic prices as well as non-organic prices. So together, you'll put together an income statement, which will cover your income and your expenses. And it should be the same as your tax year, which will give you that kind of yearly income statement. So it's similar to the balance sheet, but that balance sheet is just a snapshot of a specific moment in time, and this is typically done, the income statement, on an annual basis. So, revenue. So we have gross revenue, and it's not ugly revenue. That's just the total sales that are generated by the farm on an annual basis. And then the net revenue takes out the cost of operating expenses and goods purchased for resale. That is your net revenue. So it doesn't take out other liabilities. It is just the cost of the operating expenses and anything that you may have purchased for resale. Working capital. So you probably have heard this phrase. So this is in a measurement of dollars, and it's calculated by subtracting your current liabilities, so that would be your current debts, from your total current assets. And you should also consider in this your family living expenses. So if you live on the farm, you have to heat your house, you have to pay the electric bill. So this working capital, this is basically the cash that you have left after managing your farm and living day to day, buying food, buying gasoline to go to town. So this is really the bottom line of what you can use to pay back your debt. So a cash flow budget. So this is another. So all of these things actually interact with each other. So if you have a cash flow budget for your operations, this would show when the revenue comes in and when it goes out. And as you probably know, with farming, a lot of the time, especially if you're in crop production, the outflow is before the inflow. You have to buy seed, you have to buy fertility inputs, you have to do your tillage. If you're a vegetable grower, you have to buy transplants. If you're a livestock producer, you have to buy, feeders. And then at the end of the year, you get your big check when you sell all of your crops or your livestock. So this budget helps you budget, so you have some idea of how much will be coming in at the end of the year, and hopefully it will be a lot more than what you spent at the beginning. The other thing too in the cash flow is you can include any sales of investments that you've put in place, such as equipment. Let's say you decide that you are not going to grow corn anymore, you're just going to have a grass-fed beef operation. You can put that in your cash flow that you will be selling your corn planter. Enterprise budgets. Now this is a really good thing when you are considering starting up a new operation or expanding. What this does is it really helps you look at the cost of startup. So if you wanted to get into a goat operation, you're going to need some good fence. You're going to need some goats. You're going to need some feed. I don't know, if it's a dairy operation, you're going to need a milking parlor. If it's a meat operation, you're going to have to start looking for markets, and have someone nearby who's going to slaughter your animals. So the cost of transport to slaughter is all that's included in that enterprise budget with your costs, and as well as your operating expenses, and then finally the projected income. So this could help you decide perhaps what is the number. A lot of times when you're starting up a new operation, if you start almost sometimes too small, the cost of the infrastructure is not covered by the sales of the product at the end of the year. And working through an enterprise budget can help you figure out what size you might need to be in order to have a viable operation. And various extension websites around the country have excellent enterprise budget examples of all kinds of operations. So you just want to grow broccoli, or you want to have emus or llamas or whatever. You can go on the internet and find all kinds of interesting financial information to help you with those startup costs, because you're not going to know those costs really because you haven't done them yet. So this is outside information that can help you with the building of these enterprise budgets. So collateral. So collateral, and it might have a little bit different definition in plain English. Collateral is an asset pledged as a security for a loan. These are tangible assets again. So equipment or land, things that could be sold. So you may have a 40-acre piece of land where you typically run your cow-calf operation, but it's not really part of your main farm, and you are going to downsize, so then you could bring those animals back to your main farm. I mean, that would be collateral. And that is typically, a lot of times lenders will ask for collateral, basically specific property listed as something that could be sold in order to repay the loan that you took out if you could not pay it with cash. So this is collateral. Another thing that you can do is you could have a cosigner who then has collateral assets. They can also guarantee your loan. So when you get a loan, there's the principal and the interest. So the principal is the amount of money borrowed that is still owed on a loan. So when your first payment, it's that whole $50,000, and the second payment, it's $49,500, and it goes down every time you make a payment. This does not include the interest, and most loans will spell out what you're paying in principal and what you're paying in interest. And typically over time, you end up paying more interest up front than you do principal, and as the loan matures, that changes and you're paying less interest and more principal. So the interest, as I said earlier, is what the bank charges you for them lending you money. So depreciation, you've probably seen this on your tax forms. This is the decline in the value of assets. So this would be physical assets, and this is something that is an expense on your income statement. It's also an expense on your taxes. So here's kind of a typical time frame for depreciation. For breeding animals, they might have it be 3 to 5 years. For vehicles such as cars and trucks, it could be 5 years that you can depreciate the value of that asset. For farm machinery, 7 years, and for general purpose buildings, 20 years. Now, amortization is the description of the loss of value of an intangible asset. So, and land is typically amortized, so this has to do with and not depreciated. So this has to do with when you get an amortization schedule on a real estate loan, that kind of shows that how the loan is structured with interest and principal. And not that the land has lost any value, but it shows how the loan has changed over time between what you're paying for principal and interest. So your net worth, similar to net income, this again is your asset minus your liabilities. And then there's something called liquidity. And this is how easy it is to convert an asset to cash. So your great uncle had a rare car, and it's worth $300,000. But beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And it may not be that easy. If you needed to come up with that cash immediately, it'd be a lot easier to sell some animals, which you can take down to the sale barn, once a week, than to try to find a buyer for some kind of rare piece of equipment. So that's what liquidity is. So these animals are a much more liquid asset than a rare antique car. So there's a whole different way of looking at different kinds of debt. There's short-term, intermediate term, and long-term. And you can see that typically short-term are used for lines of credit for construction of farm buildings. If you are working with the Natural Resources Conservation Service on some conservation activities, they will not give you payment until the practice is complete. But you can go to a lender, and I believe the Farm Service Agency will work with you on this, and give you a very short-term loan to get the project going. And then once you get your payment from the Nrcs after the practice is completed, then you can pay back that loan. So that's that's a very short-term loan. It could also be purchasing seed, and then you pay back the loan in the fall when you sell the crop. Intermediate loans are between 1 and 10 years. That could be for purchasing breeding animals, infrastructure with a short life, and really looking at how you will depreciate that kind of structure on your taxes or that equipment. So those are intermediate loans, and then long-term are typically 10 to 30 years, or some very large machinery like tractors and combines. So just a smart practice would be to plan your loans so they are paid off before the assets that you have are beyond their useful life. So you would not want to, purchase something that is got a breeding animal with a long-term loan, because that breeding animal would not be around in 30 years. That's why you want to kind of match your loans to your purchases. And that's the same thing with vehicles. Don't plan to get a truck on a 30-year loan, because you will not, you'll still be paying on that truck after it's in the junkyard, unless you're really good at keeping things running. So, the word solvency means that you can pay off all your debts if the business is liquidated. So if for some reason there's a health problem or whatever, you never really want to have more debt than what your assets are to cover. So that's being solvent. And of course, that's the same thing with your repayment capacity. You want to be able to pay off that debt, which includes operating expenses, family living expenses, and any capital expenses that you're going to need to buy over time or put in place to keep your operation efficient and running. So these are things that the lenders will be looking at. And you should be able to speak to these issues when you are talking to them, when you are asking for a loan. So there is something that they look at. This is getting a little bit in the weeds. Something called a current ratio. So this is current. So there's a picture in time here of current assets divided by current liabilities. So here, if you have $200,000 of assets and $120,000 of debt, your ratio is 1.67. So that means for every dollar of debt, you have $1.67 of assets. So this is something that lenders look at. They'll say that anything more than 1.7 is strong, 1.7 to 1.4 is kind of in the middle. Boy, anything less, 1.4, 1.3 to 1.1, they are going to see you're pretty risky, because they don't think you'll be able to service the debt with that type of asset to liability ratio. So this is something you should look at even before you go in for a loan, to have some idea of where you stand with them. Kind of a lot like a credit rating. You need to know what you look like to them in a dollars and cents kind of way. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about real estate, and then I will have thrown enough terms at you that you might have to watch this again to really understand what they are. So the one thing is a land contract, and this is one way of buying land that doesn't include a lender or a bank. This is when the seller finances you. And typically they will actually finance you for at times a little bit less than the bank. But for that, they still own the real estate. When you buy from a bank, they may have, you owe a debt to them, but but basically that land is still in your name, even though you have a mortgage with the bank. With a land contract, the ownership of the land is still with the seller until you have made your last payment. So there are reasons to do this, especially if you can't find a lender who will lend to you. You can buy it from the seller, but just be aware that you need to make sure that you can pay it off. Now, over time, you can show to a lender, and this has happened, where people start out on a land contract, and then halfway through, they have enough equity to then go to a lender who then lends them the money to buy out the land contract, and then they finish out that purchase of that real estate on a mortgage or an agricultural loan. So this is the last thing you want to have, is any kind of foreclosure. That means that that the real estate was sold by the lender because that was the agreement that you had, that if you did, or it went to court, that you stopped making your payments on your land. But on a land contract, they don't have to foreclose. If you stop paying, they just retain the land because they never really sold it to you until that last payment. A promissory note is a written agreement to pay a specified sum, either on demand by the lender or at a specific time. So this is, again, ways that money can pass from hand to hand, place to place. For real estate, it's a really good idea to make sure that it's clear who owns title to the land. And since land and houses can move from many owners, the land changes in size, the borders change when the county redoes their surveying. I mean, you need to make sure that you know exactly what you're buying when you're buying it. You want to make sure there's no liens or easements. You want to know if you have any sort of, do you own the mineral rights? Do you own the forest rights? You want to know all of these things. You want to know that your title to the real estate is not encumbered and that it is fully clear. Another thing that you can do, and many times when you're buying real estate, the lender will require you to have title insurance, meaning that if for some reason you thought the title was clear, but it turns out later that it was not, you are then protected from any losses. So a lien is a legally enforceable claim against your real estate, your buildings, or any other property. And if you have a lien on something, let's say you have a tractor that you're no longer going to need and you have a lien on it from a bank, when you sell it, it may affect the value of it because the person, you don't own the whole thing, right? Somebody else owns it with you. And if a lien has not been paid whenever that property is sold, then that entity gets their payment first and you get whatever is left over. And a lien holder can force sale of property if they call in their loan. So there is something called an escrow agent or a servicing agent. This is a third party selected by the seller who holds property in trust while the transaction is being finalized. When you're using the Farm Service Agency Land Contract Guarantee Program for purchasing real estate, so they will help you purchase real estate on land contract, then you may have to use an escrow agent. That's a third party between you and the current landowner. And those agents must be bonded. They can be title insurance companies, financial institutions, attorneys, anyone that the FSA approves. So what is a family farm? And that is where the physical labor and management are provided by the family operators. They can hire labor to supplement the family labor, but this is physical labor and management on a rural piece of land producing agricultural commodities, where the operators are the family members who own and manage that land. That is a family farm, and there's lots of different kinds of family farms, but that's the basic definition. So, when you have a loan, or thinking about a loan, there's a lot of different things to look at. One of the main things is to really understand, what is there going to be the interest rate? What's going to be my monthly expenses? Try to get the best, look at your credit rating, try to get the best interest rate that you can. Really look at your debt service to make sure that you can reasonably cover that debt through all types of, have a little rainy day fund too, to make sure that you can really cover what you are borrowing, even if you have a bad season or the market drops or whatever. Try to leave yourself. You don't want to lose any of your assets because you've collateralized them to cover the debt. So hopefully you understand what I just said, because I just gave the definitions for collateral and service. So you really want to take a look at all of these things. You want to know over time what the principal is on your land that you're purchasing, and that perhaps if interest rates drop and you can get a better price somewhere else, you can look at that amortization schedule and see if that's useful to you. You want to always check the liabilities that you have on your year-end balance sheet to track your progress, to make sure that you are moving in the right direction. You don't want to keep going into more and more debt. You want to keep working out of debt, especially if you've had your land for a while. At some point at startup, it seems like you carry a lot of debt, but over time, you should be able to move out of have less debt. You'll still have operating expenses, but those capital expenditures, you should be owning more and more of those. So that was learning the lingo. And if you have any questions, feel free. There's my phone number, my email address. I'll do the best I can to help you out. And again, thanks to the Farm Service Agency for funding this series of webinars, helping agricultural producers access Farm Service Agency programs and loans. Have a good day. Bye-bye.